Everybody, it's AJ from Library of AJ. Welcome to my channel. Welcome back if you're not new here. So today is going to be a mix of what I read in February, as well as a little mini book haul I got for my birthday, and a little bit of what I plan to read this upcoming month here in March. Also, I'm trying to find different ways to hold the mic more comfortable because after a while, I type all day for work every day. So after a while, holding this teeny tiny mic in my hands hurts. So I'm trying to incorporate other things. Today is a shark topper that I got on my birthday cake. So yeah, I feel like that's pretty fitting though. Okay, so it looks like for February, I read 5 books, and it looks like my average rating was a 4.2. I had 1 3-star, 2 4-stars, and 2 5-stars. So let's get into those. So just like last time, I'm just going to put the books up on the screen because I either don't have them or they're on my Kindle, which is currently downstairs. But the first book that I read in February was The Giver. I ended up giving that 5 stars, mainly just for the sense of nostalgia. I read it when I was a kid. I read it in elementary school and middle school, I'm pretty sure. And I've seen the movie so many times that I just know the story so well, and it's comforting in a way of, brings me back to my childhood, brings me back to, just that feeling of a kid and just picking up a really good book and really enjoying the story and learning different messages and different life ideas on what it's like to be an adult or what it's like to understand and realize that the world that we're taught and grown up in is not the world that it actually is, or it's not the world that we actually see day to day, or that others see differently than what we do. But yeah, I think that the story is a great message. I know that there's a couple other books in it. I think it's like a trilogy or even a 4-part series. I'm not going to read the other ones. Like I don't have any inkling to. I think that The Giver left off in a great spot in like a what if situation. I know that and the other books answer that what if situation. And based on the other reviews I've seen from the other books in the series, that answer of, oh, what happens next has been answered for me. So either way, I don't really want to read the books because I've already gotten the answer, but also it kind of aligned with what I was hoping the outcome was. But yeah, I mean, it's still a great story. I think it's great for kids, teenagers, young tweens, that kind of age, like 12, 10-ish, you know what I mean? I just think it's a great conversation piece to have with your kids, or just as a kid, being able to talk to adults about it. And I mean, yeah, I really enjoyed it. There's not really much else other than it just hit home to me because, like I said, I read it as a kid growing up and I watched it so many times growing up that it's just a comforting story, not because of the message behind it, but just in a sense of I remember falling in love with that story because I was falling in love with reading as a kid, and that feeling just kind of came out while I was reading it. But also being an adult and knowing what I know now, I got more out of it because I was able to read it through an adult perspective rather than a child perspective or like a teenager perspective. So I can definitely appreciate that as well, and I think that also plays into the 5-star rather than just the nostalgia. But that was definitely like the biggest reason for it being a 5-star. The next book I read was Masked and Mine. I gave that 4 stars. I actually listened to it, and it was an ALC copy, and I listened to it off of BookFunnel, and I really enjoyed it. It was more spice than plot, in my opinion, but I mean, the spicy scenes were great, fairly graphic. So, if spice isn't your thing, I definitely wouldn't recommend it just because you're not going to get much out of like a story outside of it. There was a story as well in it, and I feel like because it was it was so like spicy scene, heavy, and 2, it was a novella, and I think it's tied to like other books that the author has written. I'm not 100% sure, but it's a novella. So I am assuming that all of the questions that I did have listening to it or even after listening to it are answered within the story or within the series. It's multiple point of views, and you have the 3 main characters. You have the 2 male main characters, and then you have the 1 female main character. So it kind of just bounces back and forth between all 3 of them. And I really like that. I liked being able to, just in general, how I always am with, dual POVs or multiple POVs. I really enjoy that because I like being able to get into the head of all of the main characters. When necessary. I don't think that it needs to be like that in every book, but in a situation like this, where it probably didn't need to be as much just because it was so spicy heavy, but I think because the plot that was there had an interesting storyline to it, and we did get answers and we did get, you know, things that I wouldn't have thought of or that I wouldn't have put together if it was just um, one specific point of view. So I can appreciate that for sure. But yeah, it's also dual narrated. I'm not 100% sure, but I am like 99% sure that the male narrator does both of the male main characters, and then just, the female narrator does the female main character. And that also is great because I enjoy, that distinction, just because, especially with listening, sometimes when things are said or done, it's hard to think of who it is doing it or saying it. But with the narrator doing it and being able to see, being able to hear whether it was the man or woman narrator, you can pick up automatically on where the story is and everything like that, which helped a lot because I was reading other books while I was listening to this. That also just helped keep everything, figured out for me, and just everything all together. That way I wasn't constantly confused diving back into the story. But it was a quick read, short read. It was really good. If you like thruples, if you like things like that, if you like a lot of spice, I would definitely recommend it. I would just definitely check the trigger warnings just because, better safe than sorry for sure. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Then the next book that I read, which I gave 4 stars, was The Greatest Beer Run Ever. And I actually read that for my men's book club over at Main and Mountain Bookstore. Well, it's not mine, but I don't run it. I just go to it. But yeah, that was our first book. It was our first meeting, and I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I gave it 4 stars. It was not something that I normally read, just because I don't read a lot of like nonfiction or nonfiction adjacent, which I'm trying to kind of get out there a little bit more this year. But I really enjoyed it. It made for great conversation. It was me and about 8 other guys, and we sat for about 2 hours at Main and Mountain Bookstore and talked about the book. It was our first meeting, so about half of it was just getting to know each other, and the other half was about the book. And I'm pretty sure that I was the youngest in the room, so I definitely appreciated being able to hear other people's perspective on their take of the book, just because, like, taking place in Vietnam and during the Vietnam War, I don't have a lot of knowledge on that just because I'm just too young to really know past the extent of what I was taught as a kid. So I think that, hearing the perspective of everybody else that was in the room that had just more knowledge, whether that was they knew somebody who went through it, or, there was a couple people who were super into history that knew more about it too. I think that also really made the book more enjoyable, even though I had already, star reviewed it by then. But I mean, it's still a great story, if it's not told in the sense of like a journal entry, which I can appreciate. It's not like, oh, December 1st, January 1st. Like, it's told in the sense of a story, which made it very enjoyable for me because then it just flowed really nicely. The pace was great. I also listened to it on Libby while reading it, and that also definitely helped for sure. I don't think that the author read it. I think he had somebody else narrate it, I'm pretty sure. I could be mistaken. But yeah, I listened to it, and that also made it super enjoyable because, there was just certain words that I just didn't really like know of, or just could have mispronounced things like that. So I really appreciated being able to listen to it while reading it, because that kind of also helped just keep it flowing. That way I didn't have to stop reading and look something up. And also there's a bunch of like footnotes in the book, which helped a lot, or like a lot of extra knowledge in a parentheses or like in an asterisk or something, which for me personally made a great big difference because, like I said, I don't know much about it outside of just what I was taught in school. So, the author putting that in there for the narrator to read, obviously, or like for the reader to read, helped clarify a lot of questions I would have had. So I was left with less questions than I would have if there was no additional information given by the author. So I think he did a fantastic job of, and just in general, of like supplying all the information he had from being there and dealing with what he was seeing, in person. But it also seemed like he tried his best to like give as much like outside information as he could for the reader who might not understand or might not realize like the connections between things or like what something means. So like I said, I can really appreciate that because that made it a big difference for me for sure. But yeah, I mean, it was super enjoyable. if you're into history, I would recommend it. If you're into memoirs, I would recommend it. I'm not sure if it's in all of the copies, but at least in my copy, the book had pictures like that the author took himself, or that he had from around the time that he was over in Vietnam, and so those were in there, which I thought was great because it not only put faces to the names that I was learning of, his buddies there, but it also just made it feel more real. You know what I mean? And not that it's not real already, but just made it more personable and just made it really kind of just drive home the point that what he went through is real and tragic, and it's just a wild story. That is one lucky man, and if you've read it, then you already know what I mean. But like, genuinely, he is probably one of the luckiest men that I've ever walked this earth, because like, there's just no way somebody could do that now, or probably could have done it in the way that he did it when he went over to Vietnam and did what he did. And there's also a movie, and Zac Efron plays the main character. I'm not sure if the movie like flopped, or if it just wasn't that great of like a hit or something, because like, at least for my generation, like older Gen Z and young millennials, we grew up with Zac Efron. So I just find it interesting that like, him doing this movie has never been talked about. At least, like I said, from my part of the generation, is like High School Musical, 17 again, like all that kind of stuff has always been talked about with him and his characters that he's played, but I haven't seen a single word about him playing this. Um, so I don't know if that's just because it just wasn't promoted well enough, or it just didn't do as well as they were thinking it was going to. So they just ended up not promoting it. But you can only watch it on Apple TV, and I'm just unfortunately not paying another subscription or additional money right now to see something. So I'm just not gonna watch it right now. But I'm pretty sure a couple of the guys that said that they watched it and they enjoyed it overall. So that's good to hear. It seems pretty accurate to the book apparently, which is cool. Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those, like I said, if you're really into nonfiction or like nonfiction adjacent, definitely check it out. If you're into history and all that kind of stuff, also check it out. I think the book also does a really great job of showing how what you learn in your hometown, or what you learn in just a group of people that you keep around you, is not the same as like what you see on TV, and that's also not the same as what you would get if you're actually physically there somewhere. And I think that is being proven every day, mainly in certain areas of the country like Minnesota and everything. And I think this book is pretty relevant to what's happening in the country right now. And I've always said reading is political, and it is. And if you don't believe that, then I don't know what to tell you. But I think that the book does a great job of showing propaganda and the difference in propaganda versus what's actually happening. And he even touches towards like the last, or like either towards like the last chapter or in the afterword itself. He makes a point that when the soldiers would come home, people would call them, just terrible names at the airport. But then once he went over to Vietnam himself, saw what was happening and saw what was actually going on, and then came back, he could understand why people were doing that. He could understand why people were protesting the war. And he realized that it's not necessarily that people didn't support the soldiers that were being shipped off, especially those who were drafted, but people didn't support young Americans, young teens, young adults taken from their families, fathers taken from their families, husbands taken from their families, anybody taken from their families here in America, obviously also in Vietnam, but strictly I'm talking about here in America. He was able to literally admit that he could understand why people are protesting the war, because they're protesting the act itself and the violence itself, and they're protesting against those who are running the war, essentially. Not that they don't support the soldiers who have no choice but to go fight, but that they shouldn't have to do that. So I think it's just one of those, especially in today's world, you know, a lot of people see protesting and they automatically assume that like, protesters just like hate people who are doing their jobs and all that. But there's a difference between doing your job, and there's a difference between just being a violent person who has power because you enjoy being violent, and you think you can get away with it, and you can get away with it with the power that you're given, versus actually doing a job and benefiting the country with your job. So I just think, just a little food for thought there. Like I said, it's just one of those. This book is a great example of how reading is political, and war goes beyond just what you see on the news. And like, back then, they obviously didn't have social media in any way, but especially in the way that we do now. So I think now this book is so relevant because we're seeing every day what people are seeing on the front lines. You know what I mean? Like, people are videoing what's happening all over the world, all over the country. And there's going to be some people who still don't believe it, and they're going to believe the propaganda that a news station is showing them rather than believing what actual people are going through who were quite literally there in the front lines. And his book is that entire storyline, essentially. He goes over to meet his buddies who are in Vietnam, and they're being told one thing on the news and one thing in their hometown. And then he gets there and he realizes it is nothing at all what they're being told about. So I just think that's just really interesting. And I think it makes for a decent conversation, and I'm just going to leave it at that. I think it's very relevant, and I think it's just something that people should read, in the sense of, if you don't understand how propaganda works, or you might think that, like, you know, things are what they seem, I think that this book would change your perspective on that, or at least I would hope it would strike questions that could possibly change your perspective on that. But yeah, I just think it's really important sometimes, and I think that, I think you should give it a shot. Next book that I read was The Crown, and I gave that 3 stars, and I arc read it on my Kindle. The third book of the Air and Earth and Sky, and I arc read the second one, and I listened to the first one. I'm not sure if I arc read that one as well, or if I just listened to it to like catch up for the arc of the second. But I mean, I've been looking forward to this book. It's been, I don't even know how long it's been since I read the second book, because I don't know if it's been a year because it feels like it's been a year, or it's because I've read so many books since then. But I thought it was still, I think it was a great way to end the series. It's a 3-parter. They're kind of long, but they're fantasy books, so there's only, that's kind of bound to happen. Interestingly enough, I think that in some part of the book it was too slow, and then in the same, like, thought process, in some parts of the book it was too fast, like the pacing. Like, the beginning started out very strong. It picks up pretty much right where the second book ends, which I would recommend reading them as close to back as possible, just to get the full effect, because it does pick up on the storyline where it leaves off. For me, I kind of had to piece together for the first few chapters of, I had to go back and read my review just to see where I left off, because, like I said, I just read a lot of books, so a lot has happened for me in different worlds and different stories between then and now. The beginning started off really strong. Like I said, it picks up right where it ended in the second book, and then once you get to about probably 35% through, I feel like that's when it kind of starts to slow down. And instead of just giving us just what we needed in order to understand what's going on, and in order to set up for what's happening next, which is like one of the biggest turning points in the book, which is very important to like set up the end and everything. I just feel like we spent a little too much time on that, and which, like, then in turn made it super slow, and it just kind of was like, okay, like, I get it. I see what's happening. We're good. That's been set up. And then it just kind of went on for a couple extra chapters that I just feel like we didn't really need. It seemed to be like a little bit too much filler that we didn't need, that we could kind of pick up on was happening, between, whether it was between the characters or just what they were doing, where they were at, which we already knew all of that information, so I just don't think that that was necessary to be at that point. Towards the end, like the last 25-ish, 20%, it just seemed to really fly by, not only in the sense of just what was happening, but like there were certain scenes that were happening that I feel like should have been longer and just more detailed. The way that smaller, mundane scenes were dragged on, I think those should have been like flipped, if that makes sense. Because like there was big moments that happened that were gone within a page, maybe page and a half. I just feel like it made a lot of questions of like, that came out of nowhere, or, well, that's it, like, that you lead up to that, and just for that to happen. Not to say that it's a bad book or a bad story. I don't think that. I just think what made it underwhelming, because it seemed like, we were going to get so much. We get up to the tower, and then we're good, we're great, it's happening. We're hoping to happen, or at least for me, what I was hoping to happen and what I was expecting to happen happens, but it happens within like a page and a half. But then like something that I didn't really need to know about happens for a couple chapters, previously. So it's just one of those, I just think the pacing was off at some points in the book, but towards the end, it still was a great way to end the story. I enjoyed the fantasy throughout the entire book. I really enjoyed the characters throughout the book, obviously more than others, but yeah, I it's a YA fantasy, so obviously there's no spice in it, which there shouldn't be. So the romance is very minimum, but that's fine. And you can kind of see the love that the characters have for each other in different ways, just the way that they take care of each other, the way that they talk to each other or think about each other, things that they do for them, all that kind of stuff. So like you still get the romance and the intimacy, but like not in a standard adult way, which again it's YA, so you shouldn't. But I think that it does a great job as a YA incorporating that and incorporating into intimacy and incorporating being there and loving somebody, and dealing with all of those emotions, especially during war and politics with the way that the book is surrounded in. So I think that there's a great balance there. I do think that the second book had a little bit leaned a little bit more to the romance side than it did like the war and the politics. So this book is definitely like opposite of that. This book definitely leans more on the war and the politics of it and the fantasy aspect of it, which me personally I enjoyed because I think that in order to get to the end that we got, that needed to happen in that sense. Um, I think that like the first book did a great job at setting everything up, getting to know the world, getting to know the fantasy, the characters, getting a pretty 50-50, maybe 60-40-ish, of like war and politics and romance. And then like I said, the middle book, the second book is more romance, more love, all that kind of stuff. Because of the two kingdoms and everything like that, and less of the war, less of the politics, just because the love is taking such a big place because it is important to the storyline, so it makes sense that that has to be a focus at some point. And then the last book does a great job of flipping that. That way, you still get the love, you still get all of that kind of stuff, but most of it focuses on the war and on the politics of it, which makes just for a great ending. Like I said, it's just a 3 just because I felt it was a little bit underwhelming, and I just feel like the pacing should have been flipped. And I just think that the last portion and like all that kind of stuff, everything that happened at the last end should have just been a little slower, just in the sense of just to give more time for us to kind of understand what's happening and like just get used to it or get through it, you know what I mean? So but yeah, I mean, if you like YA, if you like fantasy, you know I still recommend it. It's still a really great read. I'm not sure if the author is still doing it, but last I knew she had the first 2 books on sale for, I believe, 99 cents each, and then the third book just came out. I think that they're all on Kindle Unlimited. Not 100% sure, but I would definitely check those out for sure if that's what you're into. And then the last book that I read was The Regressor King, and I gave that 5 stars. I also read that on my Kindle, and that was also an ARC read, and that thing was like 80 something chapters. But I'll tell you what, it was worth it. Every single chapter, and honestly, I could have read more. I could have taken more chapters. I would take a second book. I would take a novella. I would take anything more about this couple. It was just, it was a really, really great read. And I'm trying to be more intentional with my 5 stars. Um, obviously giving them where I think they deserve them. But to me, I mean, the book just was really, really great. I enjoyed every page, every chapter. In the beginning, it seems like a lot of information because it's setting up the storyline, it's setting up, what's going on for the main character, or, for one of the main characters. So you are getting a lot of information at once. So that can be somewhat overwhelming. I mean, it was a little overwhelming for me at first. It took me a couple chapters to kind of be like, okay, that's what's happening. Okay, this is what's happening. Cool, got it. Now we can keep the train moving. But once you get past the first couple chapters and you understand what's happening for the main character and his life, all of it just like flies by. It really is just a great read. This book is also fantasy. This book is a gay romance, and it is an adult book. There are graphic, spicy scenes in it. So again, if that's not your thing, you should be able to kind of skip over the scenes because like they only happen at like a paragraph or maybe 2 at a time. Like there's nothing, you know what I mean? Like if you were to skip over it, you wouldn't miss out on the storyline and the plot, if that makes sense. And I also don't think I've ever read something with this kind of storyline or plot. I might have, and it's just not coming to me, but I don't think I have. So that also appealed to me because it made it very interesting and unique to me, especially with it being fantasy. I get very overwhelmed very fast with fantasies. just because a lot of the time I feel like the author will either try to do so much world building and then it's just too much and then it's so confusing for the rest of the story as I'm trying to, like piece together and understand it, or the author doesn't do enough world building and then we're just kind of going through the fantasy story not understanding what's happening because there wasn't enough to know. But this book does a great job of focusing on the fantasy itself. I do wish we got a little bit more of the fantasy aspect just because like there's multiple gods mentioned in the book and like the main character has like a specific god that he favors, which is not a it's not a spoiler or anything. But there are a couple other gods that are mentioned from other characters that I think would have been interesting to kind of just get a glimpse of, and in the same way that we got with the one male main character. But it is what it is. It's dual POV, so it's got both of the male main characters, and it's really, really good. Lots of politics, just because like it's about running a kingdom, him being a king, him being a prince, and all that kind of stuff. The politics work for that world, and I think that the author did a great job of breaking everything down, and it goes into how women are seen in politics versus men in politics, and how one is given so much slack and so much, acceptance to just like suck pretty much. But like women are not given the options or the opportunity to show that they can be in a position of power or in a position of authority. And so I think that the author does a great job of showing, how that is not always the case, and how women should be given opportunities just as men, and how men should be held accountable when they're not doing their jobs properly. I would definitely recommend it if you are into, I would probably kind of consider this high fantasy, at least higher than I would consider like normal fantasy. I don't really know. But yeah, I would consider it like higher fantasy just because it's it's just all fantasy. You know what I mean? Like that's just the main storyline, and all of that's kind of incorporated and kind of explained, like I said, not only in the beginning very well, but you learn more and more as you go through the book. And by the end of it, at least for me, I didn't have any outstanding questions on what was going on in the fantasy aspect. I just wish we could have gotten to see more of the other gods that were mentioned, just because they seemed important to a couple of the side characters. So I just think it would have been great to kind of have them pop in as a cameo, but I don't think that them not being there changed the story in any aspect because it wasn't their book. You know what I mean? Like the story wasn't focused on them and like their powers and stuff. It was focused on the god that it was centered around. So, I don't think that that really made that much of a difference, but I just really enjoyed it, so I would have enjoyed more, you know what I mean? And don't let the 80 something chapters scare you. It's worth every single one of them. Also like a little epilogue at the end, and that also really just wraps up everything in a bow for me, and I really enjoyed that as well, so I'm glad that the author included that. But yeah, like I said, I don't know if the author is going to do other things. I think right now the author has it listed as a standalone, but I hope that we can see these characters again because they were really, really enjoyable. And I think that the plot is just so unique and so different from other things that I've read, especially in the fantasy world, that I just really, really enjoyed it. And I would like to be able to visit that world again. Those are all of the books that I read in February. Like I said, it was 2 4 stars, 2 5 stars, and 1 3 star. But they were all super enjoyable. If I don't like a book, I will DNF it. So honestly, you know, I would probably recommend most of the books that I read just because I typically don't review or rate under a 3 star just because if it's going to be under that, I usually just don't finish it because I'm not going to force myself to finish a book I'm not liking. So yeah, if any of those sounded interesting to you, I would definitely go ahead and check them out. And yeah, hope you enjoy them. Okay, so the next section of this video is going to be a mini book haul of what I got for my birthday. My birthday was on Saturday, the 28th, and I went to the bookstore. I went to Mrs. B's Paperback Exchange in Kernersville, and I traded in a bunch of books there, and I got credit. And the way that it works with her is that, unless it's stated on the book, otherwise I'm pretty sure, is the credits that you get to use those towards 50% of the price, and then you pay cash or credit or whatever, but you pay the other 50%. So I turned it in, I got like 25 bucks, I think, and then I went in there with just 10 bucks just because it was my birthday, and I'm trying not to overly buy books. Went in there looking for specific books, and she had 2 copies of what I was looking for. I was looking for War and Peace. The 2 copies that she had, though, weren't in like the format that I was looking for. One was wrapped, and it was a hardcover without the dust jacket, so I couldn't see like the inside or see the pages, and it was also $25. So one, it was just out of my personal budget, and two, I just don't want to really purchase a book that I wasn't able to open and look at, so I ended up just passing on that. And the other copy she had was also a hardcover, also without the dust jacket. That was $24.99, not wrapped, so I was able to look into it. And it looked like some of the pages were just super worn. A couple of pages looked stained. It just wasn't in the condition I was looking for, which is fine. Looking for something, almost brand new, but it's a used bookstore, so there's only so much I know that I can find. But I did find a couple of goodies in there, so let's get into those. So the first book that I got was Sherlock Holmes, The Complete Novels and Stories, Volume 1. And honestly, I haven't read any of the Sherlock Holmes stories. I didn't even really realize that there was not only like novels for him, but also like short stories. And this was volume 1, and I think there's only 2 volumes. She didn't have the second one, which is fine. So I'm probably just gonna keep a lookout on like thrift books or Pango books, things like that. I'm also gonna check McKay's when I go there next time. But yeah, they had it for $4. I got it for 2. So I was really glad I found it because I found it in the classics section, and I also liked that it was all together in one volume. I think that makes it a lot easier because then, especially with it being different stories, I don't have to worry about rushing through it. I can just pick it up as like a little palate cleanser, just pick it up here and there without worrying about being dedicated to it just because it is a bigger book. But it makes sense because it's a volume of them. So yeah, I'm super excited about it. And I think it'll kind of be a nice palate cleanser from like thrillers and romance that I'm reading and the fantasy. So I'm just looking forward to some just nice, simple, mysteries. The next book that I got was Middlemarch by George Eliot, and it was a Penguins Classics edition, and it was $7, so I got it for $3.50, and it's pretty much in brand new condition. I mean, there's there's no wear at all to it or anything. Really glad that I found that. I'm trying to get more into classics and kind of just trying to, broaden my palette with all that kind of stuff. And I'm pretty sure it was already on my wish list, so it worked out that I found it there because, one, I like supporting small businesses, but two, even though it's used, there's no wear on it, so I don't mind reading secondhand anyway. So I am super excited to read that. It's super flimsy, super floppy, which I like in a paperback, so that works perfectly. We had a little technical difficulty, so the lighting might just look a little different, but if you see me looking down, it's because I have the books physically here just to make it a lot easier, but I'm also putting them up on the screen. The book that I got at the paperback was The Covenant, and also pretty good condition. It was $11, so I got it for like, $5.50. It was really great. I thought it was super interesting. I had never heard of it. It's a pretty big book, but that's okay because I'm trying to just, like I've said in previous videos, is I'm trying to get into more intentional reading, meaning bigger books, slowing down when I read a little bit. So I'm really interested to read it. It just caught my eye. It seemed to be kind of religious in the sense of about missionaries but like in a fiction, like a historical fiction situation. So I'm not really sure too much because like I don't really know what would be considered a spoiler. I think it's going to be very interesting. It takes place in South Africa, and I guess it's between the people of South Africa versus like the missionaries that come over there. So I'm not really sure how that's going to be going with like point of view. I don't know if it's in first person or third person. I didn't look too much into it because I didn't want to spoil too much outside of just the blurb. So yeah, I'm super interested to read that. I think that's going to be a great read. But yes, that is all I got at the paperback. And I received a book off of my wish list from Diana Ritchie. Thank you again, Diana Ritchie. She got me The Troop by Nick Cutter, and I've been wanting to read his books for quite a while now. And there wasn't any at the library the last time I went last week, and I've heard really good things about it. Even when I posted it, like thanking her for the gift on Instagram, a couple people slid up and said that it was really good, that they really enjoyed it. So it seems like a quick, short read. Probably read this sooner rather than later because I've heard really good things, and it's been high up on my TBR for quite a while now. And then for my birthday, a couple of my wife's aunts got me a Barnes & Noble gift card. So we went over there also or the day after my birthday. And the one that we went over to the one in Winston-Salem. And I don't know if it's just like the way they have them set up here, just because like in Florida, they weren't set up like that. But it was really cool. They had the middle piece as the cafe. And then around that was almost like, it kind of looked almost like a small little like food court because there was a bunch of tables and everything. And then like a little railing or, like holding tables into the cafe, if that makes sense. and then like all around that was like all of the different books and stuff. I forgot how expensive books are when you buy them retail, just because I buy everything secondhand, or I use Kindle Limited, or like I get them from like publishing companies or authors. So I have forgotten how expensive books are. But I went in there looking for War and Peace because, like I said, I didn't find one that I liked in a format that I liked. Ended up getting one of the signature editions. It is heavy, and I thought the Count of Monte Cristo was lengthy and heavy, but this just knocks that right out of the park. The Count of Monte Cristo, the copy that I have, is like 1,240 something pages. The copy that I got of War and Peace is like 1,600 pages. So yeah, that's gonna be a book for sure. But I've heard amazing things about it, and it's been on my wish list for quite a while and on my TBR for quite a while. So I'm glad that I found a copy that, one, I didn't have to pay for out of pocket, and two, that has a phenomenal cover that I loved, and this is the edition that had the cover that I liked the most as well. So I'm glad about that. It is paperback, which is just going to be a little heavy and a little hard on my hands and my wrists when I read it, but I've been doing okay with the Count of Monte Cristo, so I should be okay with this one too. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading this. I'm not going to start it until I'm done with the Count of Monte Cristo, and after that I want to read 11/22/63 anyways, so this is probably going to be a while from now anyways, but I'm glad to know that I have it, and I can put it on my bookshelf when we get it set up, and I'm just really, really excited to dive into it. I've heard that it's very like to the heart and very emotional, and now that I've gotten back into therapy, I'm crying again, so I think it'll be interesting to see if this also brings tears out of me. The Count of Monte Cristo hasn't yet, so we'll see how that goes by the end of it, but yeah, I'm super, super excited to read this, and I mean, again, just phenomenal cover, and I'm really excited to read it. So that was my little birthday book haul. Again, thank you if you got me something for my birthday, or gifted me anything. I appreciate it. Thank you again. I'm going to go into my hopeful TBR roughly, of what I'm looking forward to reading in March. So the first book is Hind's Feet on High Places. My wife's grandmother's got me this a couple weeks ago. I'm hoping to be able to read it sometime on one of the weekends in this month. That way, because I should be able to knock it out in a couple hours, maybe a day at most. So I'm really looking forward to that. They have said really good things about it, so I'm interested to see, one, how I like it, and two, the conversations that will come out of it, because I think that it's great when people can bond over books, whether that's because you both liked it, one didn't like it, you both didn't like it, you know what I mean? So, especially with what the plot is about and the book is about, I think it's going to make for a great conversation, so I'm super excited about that. The next book is the Men's Book Club pick, which is Fahrenheit 451. I honestly don't know if I've read it. I might have read it when I was a teenager for school, but I don't think so. But I've had my copy for quite a few years now, and I'm super excited to read it. It seems like a pretty short read, but I know it's going to be interesting. I know what it's about and everything, so I'm not worried about, the book being spoiled or whatever going into it. I think it's going to make for great conversation pieces, at the meeting. And I think that we're going to try to watch the movie too, because we're doing the meeting a couple hours earlier than last time. So not sure if we're going to just like go and just talk, if we're going to go and watch it, or try to do both. It'll probably just depend on like what we're looking at time wise and what everyone is up to. But a couple of the guys had already started it, which is what helped us lead to pick it for March. And a couple people have already read it recently or haven't read it at all. So it's pretty much a mixture of everybody, and where they stand on the book, like reading it wise. I just think it's going to be super interesting, and I'm very excited to see what everybody thinks about it. The next book that I'm for sure going to read this month is The Count of Monte Cristo. I'm actually hoping that I can finish it this month. The book club that I'm in, that we're reading it in, which is the Slow Intentional Book Club over on Fable, we have it set to be done with it on March 14th. Not sure if I can get there by March 14th, because I'm like exactly halfway, but I think with that being the only book that I really need to read this month, other than one arc and my men's book club, which like those would probably take me like a week together at most, I should have more than enough time to be able to kind of hunker down and really just dive deep back into this book and just get through the rest of it. Not in a sense of rushing through it, but just in a sense of it is an amazing story. The characters are amazing. Right now where I'm at, which is like 50%, like, because I'm pretty much right exactly halfway. It's a little slow. It's a little overwhelming with all of the people that we're getting to know. But from what I've heard over from a mutual over on TikTok, he said that he also felt the same way during this point in the book, but after that it picked right back up and he really enjoyed it in the way that it all worked out, and that this is necessary for how the ending is and how the last half of the book is. So one being, with it being on the back burner, I think that also kind of makes it feel a little bit slower, but two, also knowing just other people are thinking this part of the book is a little slower. I think once I get over that, part of the story and I can dedicate more time and energy into it, I think that'll just naturally flow and naturally get me back on pace. Because I was reading it pretty fast when I was first starting it, honestly, and I was having to stop myself so I could stay roughly with the pace of the book club. But now I've fallen behind a little bit. So I'm really excited to finish it, just not in a sense of just feeling the accomplishment of finishing a book that big, but just in the sense of I've just really been enjoying it, and I'm excited and I'm interested to see what's going to happen towards the end in the last half. So if you haven't read it or if you're thinking about reading it, I would recommend it. And I'm not even done with it, so I think it's a really, really great book. I think it's very interesting. And I think, honestly, even though it is a big book, don't let that scare you, because I think it's a great introduction to classics and things like that. I'm pretty sure it's technically my first like classic read. There are a couple like words or names or things like that you might kind of just like be confused or struggle with, just because like some things are mentioned like in a different language like Spanish or French because of where it takes place. But for the most part, there are like footnotes or asterisks that kind of give you more information, or parentheses that give you more information. And so, I think that the translation does a great job at helping that, because then you don't feel as overwhelmed and as like unknowledgeable about what's being said, you know what I mean? So yeah, I would definitely recommend it for sure. Another book that I'm hoping to read this month is The Reformatory, and I can never pronounce that word right, but I've been seeing it circling on TikTok for a while now, and a couple people that I'm mutuals with have recently read it and they liked it, and a couple other people that I just follow in general really liked it. So I've just heard really good things about it in general. When I went 2 weeks ago to the library, they didn't have it, but like on the website it said that they had it. But when I went in and looked for it, it wasn't on the shelf, so the library had to like order another copy, because I guess it got turned back in, but I don't know if it just maybe got like misshelved, or if it got lost after somebody had returned it. So they ordered me another copy, so I picked that up last week, and I'm looking forward to reading it. It seems to be like a decent sized, middle sized book, library book, so I don't want to keep renewing it, and if anything, I just return it and I pick it back up when I can. But I've heard really good things about it, and up until 2 weeks ago, it was consistently on hold or consistently checked out. So that's why I'm trying to hope that I can spend the time to read it, because I don't want to have to be, all the way back down on a hold list. But yeah, I'm looking forward to reading that for sure. And another book that I'm possibly hoping to read this month, it's also from the library, but honestly, if I don't get to it, it's not that big of a deal because I can just keep it on my TBR. It's called Widershins or Widdershins. I'm not really sure how it's pronounced, but it's a decent sized book as well. I've never heard of it. I've never seen it. I haven't seen anybody talk about it. I haven't heard anybody talk about it, but the blurb really stuck out to me, and the cover stuck out to me. I think it is like an older book, not in the sense of historical fiction, but just it's just been released quite a while ago, but it looked really, really interesting and it sounded super interesting. But again, I have other books, especially The Count, that I'm looking forward to reading this month. So again, if I don't get to it, not a big deal. I'm not stressed about it, but I would like to eventually, even if I just get to start it towards the end of the month. But yeah, I think it just sounds super interesting. So if you have read it, let me know down in the comments if you've liked it or if you didn't like it. The last book that I'm going to be reading this month is Be Not Afraid, and I'm probably going to read that towards like the second-ish week of the month. It is an ARC read. That's when the reviews due, so I try to read ARCs as close to the due date as possible, just because I really want it to be fresh in my mind when I'm writing the review, and I want to enjoy it as well when it's getting released, so that way I can enjoy it with everybody else as much as possible. But it sounded really interesting. I actually found it through Cali, because I'm listed on Cali, and if you're an author listed on there, definitely let me know and I'll check out what you have. But you can pretty much like collab with authors on there and stuff. And I had originally applied to do a PR box, and the author had reached out to me after like the collab was closed, and said that there was so many more applicants than she had boxes. So she ended up offering me and a couple other people an ARC copy of the ebook. That way we could still read it if we were interested. And I was, because I wasn't interested in it just for the PR box. I think it sounds like a really great story. It sounds very interesting, very up my alley and what I like to read, and just kind of what, piques my interest and stuff. So I'm super looking forward to reading that. I already have it. It's on my Kindle. It's currently loaded on my Kindle. So I'll probably realistically read that on and off until the due date, just because The Count is such a big book to bring with me out in public, or just like anywhere I go. So like when my wife and I go read somewhere, I usually just end up defaulting back to my Kindle. So I'll probably be on and off of that for a while, but again, I'm super interested in that. I don't remember 110% off the top of my head when it releases, but I would definitely keep an eye out for that. I'm just looking forward to all of these books, mainly The Count, but all of them for sure. Hard to pick a favorite, right? But yeah, that is what I'm roughly looking forward and hoping to read this month. Again, some books might change. I might read the Nick Cutter book rather than rather than one of the other books. I just don't know. We'll just have to see. We'll adapt as we go. But yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to reading this month. Thanks again for watching my video. And like I said, if you've read any of these books, or if you plan on reading them, let me know. Let me know what you think, if you've liked them, if you didn't like them, if you agreed with my opinion or my review on them. If you don't agree, just be nice. That's fine. But yeah, let me know what you're reading down below. What was your favorite read of February? What was your least favorite? What's your most anticipated read for March? Also, happy birthday if you have a birthday in February, especially if you're a Pisces. Happy birthday if your birthday is in March as well. Thanks again for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.